Even though I'm pretty sure my marriage was abusive in some respects, I still struggle with calling it that and seem to need confirmation and reminders. That's why I found so difficult. Why
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, this is a question I hear a lot. And so, first of all, the person asking the question, you must be in the right place because this is part of the process. For us to recognize that there's abuse is overcoming a lot of hurdles because A, the abuser is telling you it's your fault, it's not abuse, no way, you're just too sensitive. You're thinking about it wrong. If you wouldn't do this, then I wouldn't have to do that. Then in many circumstances, I see women have very difficult circumstances made even more difficult by well-meaning but really unhealthy church people telling them that they need to stay and that it's wrong spiritually. So now God is on the abuser's side. And so of course, when you start to move away from that, it's a very difficult thing to hold on to. So what I see all the time is that it comes in moments like, oh, I have clarity. Oh, it is abuse. Oh, I see it clearly. And then whew, the fog comes back over. And this is why I highly encourage women to document what they have experienced. Because in the fog, your mind can't get to that clarity. But if you open up a notebook or a journal or something you've written on, and then you read it, you're like, oh, right, okay. It was abusive. It is abusive. I'm not crazy. He is a jerk. So I think it's a very common thing, and I really encourage people to document and to talk to other people who are clear that what their situation is abusive. And so you have to sort of vet people a little bit. You can't just talk to anybody. So I would say it's a normal process, but if you are ping pong between seeing it as abuse and not, you're making progress. It's when you see it as no abuse, when there's abuse, when you're in the trap.
The next one is I still find myself missing my husband even though I have head knowledge that he wasn't treating me healthy.
Mm.
My heart/spirit seems to question that. Why
Yeah.
is that?
Well, I think that it's not so much about the person you're with, your ex-husband or your abusive husband. I think really it's more about we're grieving the death of our dream. The reason why we got into the relationship wasn't to be abused, right? The reason we got into the relationship is because we wanted to be loved. We wanted to love someone else. We wanted this intimacy, this caring, this marriage, whatever we thought of that was before it happened, right? And so I think a lot of times what I see happening is we're missing that dream and we're attaching it to the person who's harmed us. But think about it for a second, intellectually, honestly, why would you want to be with someone who harms you? That doesn't make any sense, right? But there's a lot of training that we get as people in the church and in our culture that, particularly for women, their job is to make it work, right? And so the agenda is, if it doesn't work, it's your fault. And I think there's also a sense in which if I can stay with the abuser, then I don't have to face all that pain. And so I'm a big proponent of walking into the buzzsaw of that pain and the grief, because on the other side of that grief is the freedom that you actually seek. But to avoid the pain, back to one of my favorite quotes by M. Scott Peck, the avoidance of pain is the beginning of all unhealthy behavior. So do not avoid the pain and document, document, document.
So do you think that people use missing their husband as a way to avoid their pain?
Absolutely. I think if I say that I miss my husband, right, then I'm still connected to it. Instead of looking at the fact that this person harmed me to the place where I could no longer stay in the relationship. And that ushers me right into the grief of, I don't have a husband, my family is broken. All those dreams that I attached to that relationship are gone. And the person has been harmful. Like, when someone you think loves you is harming you, that's a very painful reality. And so I don't think anyone goes through that evenly. or consistently, I think it's a very difficult process. So one day you'll feel clear, and the next day you won't. It's like the waves you can hear behind me. It comes in waves. So in one moment, like now, it's quiet, and then the next set will come. Okay? So it's the same way with the grieving and the loss of the relationship. It comes in waves. One minute you're fine, the next minute you're in a fetal position. Good. Every time you have that emotion come up, the more of it you can let out, the better off you are. One of my favorite quotes, tears are the blood of the soul. So when your soul's been cut, the first stage of healing is for you to cry. But when you've been in an abusive relationship, that's not allowed. Or it's manipulative, or it's weak, or it's bad, or whatever. But I'm just telling you, I'm here to tell you, the lies about shedding tears are plentiful, but it is God's design for us to heal on a soulic level, to let those out. And if you don't, you're gonna complicate your emotional reality.
Does looking back and trying to understand some of these things keep me stuck or part of healing?
Looking back and trying to understand is always a way of staying stuck. Because looking back, what can you do? Nothing. Okay, but what I'm doing is I'm emotionally attaching to what was. Okay, and again, I think it's another grief avoidance. I call it giving CPR to the dead guy. You see it in the movies all the time. You know, there's a family situation, someone dies, family member starts doing CPR on the dead person, and they're going way too long, and everybody's like, they're dead, you need to stop. And the person is trying to help. They want their loved one to live, but really the reason why they won't stop isn't because they're trying to save the person. It's because they're trying to avoid the grief of the fact that they're dead. And so I think we do the same thing. We give CPR to the dead guy. Okay, and so we're giving all this energy to it, which is helping us avoid facing the truth of the death of the relationship. That's never easy, and I have great compassion for everyone who's gone through that. But I also know that if you don't go through it, you will never be free. And so trying to understand is the other part of that question I wanted to address. I think trying to understand is another avoidance. So listen, crazy, abusive doesn't make sense. And so no matter how long you think about it or how much energy you put into it, it's never going to make sense. It doesn't make sense that someone who says they love you harms you in a systematic, destructive way. Lies to you, undermines you, hurts you, manipulates your children, takes your money. That doesn't make sense. So one of the things I say a lot is, don't try to understand, take a stand. Okay? Because if you take a stand, then you're going to start moving yourself away from the harm. And if you don't, the abuser doesn't care. They can rationalize anything, right? They can make anything true. So that's why it's so important for you to take a stand instead of trying to understand. That will lead you to a lot of harm. And the abuser will use that as a lever to control you.